the golden spit. Cassie Perez stared at her boyfriend aggressively, slowly realizing what he was up to. He kept replaying the same part of the movie over and over again, watching the scene closely every time he did so. Cassie frowned irritatingly at the movie as it panned into the Bubes monster. "What the hell are you doing, Ray?" she yelled, startling him and nearly causing his fries to fall down. "You're such a pervert." "Dude," her boyfriend said coolly, "can you just chill for a bit? I'm just admiring the character design for the monster. Look at those tits. I mean, those holographic scales on them are absolutely genius." "You're a liar, Ray. I know you're eyeing the boobs. You keep replaying the same part over and over again. Look, it's happening again. Oh God, look at your mouth all open and drooling," Cassie yelled. Ray Melendez was, however, too absorbed in the screen to notice her plight. He wanted to see it again, the magnificent Bubes monster coming out of the ocean to terrorize all of New York, the camera zooming into the magnificent tits as they squeezed men between its cleavage in its wake. Ray slowly took the car up to the drive-thru counter, ready to take the food that they had ordered. His eyes were still very much glued to the screen as he let down the window on Cass's side so she could receive it. "I am telling you, Ray, I feel insulted, as if I'm not enough," Cassie screamed, her hands cupped across her chest. "That'll be $20.99, ma'am." The underpaid employee spoke to her, handing her a large brown bag full of burgers, fries, and drinks. "My boyfriend thinks I'm not enough," Cassie screamed at the employee, who sighed and rolled her eyes. "Ma'am," she spoke, tired of her shit already, "this is a McDonald's." 5 minutes later, Cassie sat contentedly with her man, hungrily chomping down on her burger. "This is delicious." Ray looked at her and smiled. Yes, she was crazy, he thought, but he loved her more than anything. At that moment, watching her eat the burger calmly, a little mayonnaise dripping down the side of her mouth, he wished he could stay in this non-violent scenario for all eternity. "Babe," he said, kissing her head and leaving a greasy lip stain, "I just want to let you know that you're perfect. The Bubes monster's large, glamorous titties are nothing in front of your tiny ones." Cassie gleamed, finally happy at the backhanded compliment. It was all right, though. Cassie needed love, and Ray was there to give it to her. They continued to watch the movie as the Bubes monster sat in place of the Statue of Liberty, looking down upon the city. It recalled its childhood at the MK Ultra labs where the large tits were being experimented upon to be more suitable in the productive distraction of important people who made legislative decisions. Once any man set eyes on the boobs, he would be enchanted and mesmerized forever, influenced only by the body that wore the boobs. Sadly, the experiment fails as the camera shifts toward a shot of two massive boobs bouncing across the guarded facility of the labs, wrecking everything in their wake just to ultimately escape into the lake, where they grow in size over the next few months. "I'm sleepy," said Cassie, her eyes wavering open and shut. "Oh no, dude. This is the main scene. You gotta watch this, Cass." Ray's eyes were glued to the screen. The next scene of the movie cut to a few blocks down the road from the experiment station a few months later, where sinister things seemed to be happening. The cool wind blew through Oliver Smith's taxi as he closed his eyes and put his head back, thinking about the day. It had been a long and hectic one, but he was happy enough. The sales were good today, and he finally had enough money to pay his rent before the due date this month. Heck, maybe he would even take his girlfriend down to the wine bar she'd been begging for so long to go to. He lay thinking about life as the occasional car passed by him. He loved sitting like this without a car in the world, relaxed about finances and wages. Maybe he could even travel across the state to visit his grandmother next month. A sharp whizzing sound disturbed his tranquility, breaking him from the peace he had found after so long. It was loud and whistling, stopping very abruptly near his car as if someone had tossed a very loud frisbee toward him. Stupid kids, he thought, getting out to look behind him. His rearview mirror had very bad clarity, but he could see a dark object silhouetted in the night. The cool night air sifted his long, luscious locks seductively as he made his way around the car. It was a pair of boobs. Oliver stared at the giant tits in confusion, trying to make some sense of the situation. They vibrated in their place, their edges blurring as they oscillated slightly. They seemed to be alive, almost. What the fuck, Oliver thought, inching closer to them. They were a glorious spectacle indeed, decorated with perky tits and silky smooth skin. Though the boobs had no eyes, he felt as though they had pinned their eyes on him, waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. As he closed the distance, trying to get a better view, the pair of boobs stopped vibrating. It was a peculiar article indeed. Without a warning, the tits shot out from there and latched themselves onto Oliver's face, adhering so tightly that no matter how hard poor Oliver tried to pry them off, they wouldn't budge. They were too perky and uncomfortable, and immensely warm to the point of being painful. Oliver screamed into the silence of the dark night, his piercing cries cutting through the cool night air. He writhed about on the ground, trying to yell for help, but there was no one around at this hour. The few cars that did pass by and saw him thrashing about on the muddy road with a pair of boobs on his face ignored him, taking him for some hippie druggie who'd taken an extra patch of LSD. The movie cut again to the next scene that took place half an hour later, and not very far away. Miranda Ria exited the La Chine restaurant with a smile on her face and a bag of takeaway chow mein in her hands, thankful to escape the very disappointing date that she'd just been on. She chided herself for wearing the tallest heels she could find, all for a crusty old man who wanted her to take care of his 3 grown adult children by marrying her. Oh no, she thought, laughing to herself. She deserved better indeed. At least she'd gotten a box of free chow mein for her troubles. As she walked down the deserted road at this late hour, making her way back to her apartment, she felt someone follow her. She turned around to see that it was a taxi, moving very slowly behind her at a distance. She felt scantily covered in her mini skirt and crop top. Thus, she was pretty sure the perverted driver was eyeing her generously crafted silicon rear. "Fuck off!" she screamed into the night. "I don't want to ride!" The taxi continued to follow her slowly. She stopped angrily, a lump of fear building in her heart. There was no one around to come to her aid if she needed it. The taxi windows were tinted and dark. Thus, she couldn't see what was going on inside, or who it was that stalked her at this hour of the night. She held her apartment keys between her fingers. The taxi stopped by her side, its window rolling down slowly. A gloomy voice emerged from within, although no face was visible. "You dropped some money, ma'am." The voice spoke, followed by disturbing heavy wheezing as if someone was trying to swallow their phlegm. "Huh? Money? Where?" Miranda replied, immediately forgetting that she was supposed to be in danger. "Come closer so I can give it to you, pretty missus," the voice replied. "Give me my money, you rascal," Miranda screeched, her voice rising. As soon as she came into the vicinity of the car, a mutilated hand shot out of the window, grasping at her fake bosoms. It was stinky and injured, and the fingers were coated with sticky blood that had left fingerprints on her chest. "Help! Help me!" she screamed, looking around her to find nobody. The camera panned around to show the depressingly empty road that was inhabited by not even a wandering soul. The hand tore through her crop top, feeling around for her bosom as she screamed and tried to pull back. But it was of no use. It held onto her bra tightly, tearing it open right in the middle of the night on the dark street. Her boobs plopped out, feeling the fresh night wind on them, as she screamed in frustration. The monstrous hand pulled back with a satisfied groan, rolling the window up again. The mysterious taxi driver sped off into the night, leaving poor Miranda standing on the lonely road with her boobs hanging out like two silicone pillows. She screamed and screamed, but no one was there to help her. "That sucked," Cassie said, watching the movie through half-closed eyes. "I hate this movie, Ray. Put something interesting on." "This is interesting, babe," Ray responded, his eyes glued to the screen as Miranda's boobs jiggled around in the stark darkness of the night. A huge blob of yellow goo suddenly landed on the windshield of their car. Cassie and Ray both jumped suddenly, startled by the disgusting thing that now slid slimily down the glass. "You, Ray! What is that?" Cassie screamed, wringing her arms about. "I dunno, man. What the fuck?" Ray shouted, pausing the movie and rolling down the window. He looked outside, still hurling abuses at whoever had thrown the disgusting thing on his windshield. "I asshole!" Ray screamed, seeing someone walk hazily toward his car. Cassie started to freak out inside, looking at the goo that turned opaque and yellower by the second. It was repulsive to look at indeed, and it made her physically sick to think that this may be someone's body fluids. In the middle of her thoughts, Cassie hadn't noticed that Ray had gotten completely silent. He spoke less, and his shouting soon died down. He was still looking outside as if he was watching someone, but not a muscle twitched. "Baby?" Cassie said, calling him gently, confused by his behavior. "ARGH," Ray rumbled slowly, still looking outside. Cassie was a little frightened at that point. Clearly, something was not normal. Gently, she put an arm on his shoulder. Suddenly, Ray's neck snapped around in Cassie's direction. She screamed. His face wasn't normal. He looked like a rabid animal about to devour her like a little snack. He snarled at her with wild eyes, his mouth contorted into a strange grimace. "Ray, are you okay?" Cassie screamed, her eyes watering. Ray did not answer. Instead, he produced a weird guttural sound from the base of his throat, as if he was about to gurgle. He turned his head upwards and produced a huge blob of spit in his mouth, throwing it straight at Cassie's face. "Ray, what the fuck are you doing?" Cassie screamed, the yellow goo melting her makeup. "Oh my God, Ray, you're such a dick." Ray didn't care. His brain wasn't working, surely. Something eerie had gotten into him, freeing him of all human manners. He hadn't a single thought in his head as he subconsciously turned his head back up, readying another deadly volley of spitballs. "Ray! Ray, don't you dare! I swear to God, Ray Dash!" Ray did not care what she swore upon God. He initiated another series of targeted attacks at Cassie, spitting not only on her, but on everything around them, including the Bubes monster that was jiggling on the screen. Cassie frantically opened the door of the car, stepping out weakly in tears, as her boyfriend continued to throw spitballs at everything around them. Soon, the entire interior of the car was covered in thick yellow sticky spit. The Perez's home was deep in thought on Friday morning. The entire family sat gloomily in the big TV lounge, watching the screen intently. The room was silent as the family tried to individually think about the best way to combat the ongoing situation. Cassie Perez sat next to her mother on the couch, her face gloomy and stern. She was particularly pissed off the most. Ever since the incident with Ray, she decided to break up with him after there was no attempt at reconciliation from his side. No message, not a single call, nothing. It was as if he had forgotten about her altogether. Her father wouldn't let her leave the house to go check in on him. He said that the situation was bleak outside. Of course, she didn't really understand how that had any relation to visiting Ray's house, which was only a few blocks away. The news channel buzzed noisily on the TV. It spoke of a peculiar phenomenon happening worldwide, due to which millions of people were rendered useless. Reports of spitting on a massive scale. Experts are saying that this phenomenon is caused by a hijacking mechanism by an army of extraterrestrial hat-like objects that descended from outer space. NASA had been observing them orbit the planet a few times beforehand too, but this time, the unidentified objects made the descent. "That is the most ridiculous shit I've ever heard, honestly," Martin said, the youngest of the two. "Language!" Mother yelled, shutting him up instantly. "We need to think about how to avoid this." Cassie's father paced across the lounge in deep thought, making a plan on how to avoid the situation. "New rules, everyone," he said finally. "No more getting out of the house. No more school for a while. No outings with friends. We stay indoors at all times." "But Dad," Martin groaned, "that's totally too extreme. Nothing's happening in our street. Come on." "Shut up, young man." As soon as the hats land on the heads of any poor human, it is almost impossible to pry it off. It unlatches off itself after the mind has been hijacked and the deed is done. The spits were mostly harmless and free of any infective viruses or bacteria, and thus the disease is non-transferable. We request the people to wear protective headgear to avoid the hat adhering onto your skull. Sarah, please check how much of the canned food we still have in our pantry. We are going to stall for as long as possible, Cassie's father said to her mother. That night, Cassie couldn't sleep. She was kept awake by the disturbing guttural sounds of the diseased outside, roaming around on the street and spitting on everything they could find. Cassie got up, deciding that trying to snooze was useless. She sat by the window, which shone brightly with moonlight. The window was smaller now since her father had hammered wooden planks onto the edges that morning to prevent break-ins by any rogue hats flying around dangerously. Another sound cut through the night, a more bizarre and weird one. Someone was whistling an old cheery tune outside. Cassie peered out into the moonlight and saw Matthew, their erratic, lonely hippie neighbor, standing on his lawn, dressed head to toe in protective gear. He held a whistle inside his suit which he kept blowing. Periodically, he would stop whistling and would bang a drum that lay against his feet. It took Cassie a good 15 minutes to realize what revolting Matthew was doing. He was baiting the mindless disease by attracting them with loud noises, trying to lure them into his house. But why would he do that, Cassie thought. As she watched, a huge horde of confused zombie people entered his home, spitting on him and on the lawn as they crossed. His entire car was covered with yellow goo from the spit. He looked at all the yellow spit around him like a crazy maniac, with a peculiar look of lust in his eyes. Things got even more odd as the hour passed. Cassie was glued to the window, watching Matthew's strange behavior. He had now locked all the zombie people safely in the vicinity of his house, where she could hear them spit around nonstop. Matthew, however, was outside on his lawn. He had a huge bucket tucked underneath his arm along with a large spade. One by one, he scooped the viscous yellow phlegm into the bucket, smiling grotesquely as he did so. Cassie wanted to puke. Why in the world would Matthew ever do something so nauseating? What did he know that no one else did? Cassie got her answer in the morning as she ate her breakfast cereal topped with powdered milk. The TV blared in the lounge, echoing bad and bizarre news through the house. The phlegm, once dried, turns into pure solid gold, 100% pure. Scientists are baffled by this new discovery, astonished at how disgustingly filthy phlegm can turn into something so pure and precious. Cassie froze, her eyes pinned to the TV. So that is what greedy Matthew was doing. He had unethically imprisoned a bunch of zombies in his house, using their dried-up golden phlegm to gain himself vast riches. The doorbell rang as Cassie sprung out of her thoughts. "Martin! Go check the door!" Sarah shouted. "Mom, I'm taking a shit!" "Ask Cassie." Martin's muffled voice came from somewhere deep within the house. Rolling her eyes, Cassie got up to check the door. Indeed, it was no one other than Matthew himself, looking at her with a deceptive smile on his face. "Hello, hello, sunshine," he said, baring his rotten teeth. He was even more revolting up close, and a lot more hideous too. Cassie frowned at him. "What do you want?" she asked irritatedly. Matthew picked up the bucket of phlegm that was near his feet. It was now filled with splotches of gold, all in chips and blocks of all sizes. "I'm here to make you a very special offer. You will be rich. Look at all this gold." Hee. Matthew gleamed at his golden bucket. "Buy this from me for only $500,000. Here, check this. It is around 40 pounds in weight. Piss off, weirdo. No one wants to buy your phlegm here. Take it somewhere else." With that, Cassie shut the door on his face, blocking out his nauseating features away from her sight. A few days later, a bunch of interesting things happened as the family watched TV at night. It seems as though once again, America has proven to be the greatest nation in the world. We are pleased to announce that the United States Air Force has taken down all of the repulsive flying hats from the continent of America, cleansing our pure land of its filth. The hats are now being burned in the desert area of Nevada, right inside Area 51. No one will ever have to worry about killer hats plunging themselves onto their heads. Congratulations, everyone. Cassie stared at the TV, unsure how to feel now that it was all over. On one hand, she was excited at the prospect of going out without having to worry about a stupid flying hat latching onto her head, but on the other hand, she would really miss Ray, who was still out there somewhere in the wild, spitting blobs of yellow viscous spit at anything that moved. As the days passed, things slowly started getting back to normal. The sky no longer whirred with random flying hats, and kids played outside normally. The grocery stores and schools opened, allowing life to continue as it once did. Buses and cars honked on the streets again, letting everyone know that no longer would anyone have to be afraid. Cassie too slowly recovered from the breakup, still in grief that her last memory of Ray was him lusting over a movie about giant tits and then spitting on her soon after. Often after school, she visited him in the woods nearby, carrying an umbrella to shield herself from his golden spit bombs. It was where he now lived, enjoying his time spitting in the open. He was thankfully not disposed of, and stayed alive for a long time until he eventually made the mistake of spitting on a wild wolf, who ripped him apart viciously. Life continued as it was for everyone, including Cassie. She finally moved on, getting another boyfriend who was thankfully less of a pervert than Ray, even going so far as to consider marrying him. The only person for whom life was not so good anymore was the repulsive old Matthew. You see, as the abundance of zombie people who spat gold increased, the price of gold shot down like an airplane crashing onto the ground. Poor old Matthew had accumulated so many zombies in his house in the hopes of cashing their spit that he didn't even get the chance to watch TV amongst the abundance of spit that had accumulated and solidified in his home. The TV was somewhere underneath the mess, totally irretrievable. Matthew, still under the impression that his gold would ultimately sell, kept the zombies hidden in his house as the army cleared them outside. He did not know that his little gold secret was now a very public phenomenon, with a large golden necklace selling for $2 measly on the streets. Ultimately, when the police did find out, they punished him by not allowing the zombies to exit his house. They would stay inside indefinitely, spitting on whatever they wanted to. A few months later, Matthew was no longer heard of, as his entire house had turned into a block of solid gold. Some said that he had run away, and some said that he was beaten to death by one of the repulsive spitting zombies in his home. But Cassie knew that wasn't true. Repulsive old Matthew was too much of a cheapskate to leave his preciously bought house. She knew he was still in there, somewhere deep underneath the mounds of spit that had accumulated over the months. Somewhere under the uncleanable mess, repulsive old Matthew lay on the floor, frozen solid into a block of gold, still wearing his revolting greedy facial expressions.